what you're about to see is out of this world. But before I show you, see, we are only remaining with very few subscribers to reach 60,000. Guys, we can actually do this together. There is the subscribe button if you haven't subscribed already, and if you have, be kind enough to share this video or my videos to a wider audience. If you don't do any of those, there's a higher chance you will never see me ever again on YouTube, because YouTube won't be recommending my videos to you. Right, today's video is crazy. I'm going to show you how to destroy the queen's pawn game with only one strategic move, e5. Not really the Budapest, but you're going to see. And this is for those of you guys who enjoyed my names of which defense course, and also my French mechanas, even the mechanas defense. As you are going to see, the key move in all of the variations will be pawn to e5, and I have two separate systems for you. So let's get started. If your opponents don't play d5, just think of transposing the game back to the Budapest like I showed you. And if pawn to c4, just go e5 next. They always play d5, and that's when you want to play bishop b4 check, transposing the game back to the Nimzowitsch defense. Once again, after knight f3, what if you meet the second type of d4 players who love combining the London system ideas with the Queen's Gambit setup? Yes, after knight f6, they like starting with bishop f4 before playing c4, and this kind of stops pawn to e5, so we're not going to have our normal Budapest, right? But maybe there's a way we can transpose this back to the Budapest after d6, e3. But since this video is all about the pawn to e5 strategy, we want to find a way of playing that move, even against the London system. How? Follow what I'm going to do here. You start with knight d7. There's nothing white can do, remember. With this move, you're now ready to go e5. For example, after bishop c4 or bishop d3, doesn't even matter. You know that white wants to double attack the f7 pawn like this. So before you play e5, maybe it is wise to go pawn to h6. Always remember to read your opponent's plans as well, not just your plans. And after something like castle shot, this is when you play e5. Mission accomplished. If pawn takes, you take back like this, and next you develop your bishop on d6. Back to the e4 e5 opening, you will play queen e7 and castle shot. So once again, even in the London system, just consider playing knight d7 and pawn to e5. But what if white plays pawn to c4? Just like I said, remember, we are looking at the second type of d4 players who love combining the Queen's Gambit setup with the London system ideas. Once again, you can just go pawn to e5. That's why you played knight d7 on the previous move. If pawn takes, you just take back, and after bishop g3, you go bishop d6. Mission accomplished. So you play queen e7, castle shot. But wait, we'll look at the third type of d4 players who play the London system, not mixing up with the Queen's Gambit setup. Well, the good thing is this simple d6 system that I've showed you, where you want to play e5 after knight d7, works pretty much well even against this. Again, you can go knight d7 instead of bishop c4 or pawn to c4. This time, let's say white plays bishop d3, a move that they always play in the London system. Again, you can simply go e5 and reach the same position that I just showed you, where you put your bishop on d6. Bingo. So now we have seen that after knight d7, white can't just continue playing the normal looking moves that we looked at. Maybe they have to adjust and play pawn to d5, trying to disturb our plan. But even after this, you can just go knight e5. One day you will put your knight on g6 and the other knight on e5. And maybe if white allows, you will take and put the other knight on e5, develop your e-pawn, take. They'll probably take by this time, and then you take back with your knight. If bishop takes, you still have your bishop pair, so you just take back. If bishop b5 check, you block with the bishop. If queen e3, chase that light squared bishop. If bishop takes, you take back with the queen. Say knight c3, defending their pawn. It's up to you to castle long if you want. Fianchetto on the king side and castle short, or just play e6 right away. Because if this, you will take back with your queen, and then on the next move, castle long or castle short. One more line against the London system. After you play d6, what if white doesn't play e3 this time? Because this allows you to play knight d7 and e5, right? Well, there are times where they play c4 immediately. Well, you see, once again, this idea of playing knight back to d7 seems to be very cool, and Stockfish likes it actually. Because even if d5 happens, you have knight e5, you will take and play that same thing This is how you neutralize the London system if you think about it. So c4 is out of the equation, maybe knight c3, but once again we want to make this London bishop look useless, right, along this diagonal. So you can always rely on this move, knight back to d7 if you have to, of course. You're just one move away from playing e5. This video is about e5. This time maybe white may even play e4, and then you go pawn to e5, pawn takes, bishop g3, and bishop d6, back to square one. One more time after pawn to e3, and then you go knight back to d7, intending to go e5. What if white rushes out with bishop b5? I doubt if most of your opponents are going to do this anyways. Well, it turns out again you can play e5. Same position. This time if bishop takes, you just take on f4, material is equal. After check with bishop takes, you take back with your bishop, and after pawn takes, looks like you're down a pawn, but what is this? Honestly speaking, you can give a check and castle long to be ahead in development, and the position will be equal according to Stockfish. Or if you don't want to exchange queens, you can go queen f6, because if queen e2 check, you have bishop e7, and it will be up to you to choose where you want to castle. Right now you are attacking the f4 pawn, so if they dare try to defend it, these are their weaknesses. If you think about it, you will castle short and start taking advantage of those. Even if they play queen e3, you can just castle short, and after this you play rook a e8 if you want. The thing is, sooner or later you're going to get rid of this. Material is equal according to Stockfish. The other types of d4 players you're going to see are the ones that like playing the Colle system. After pawn to d4, and then you start with your Mykonos defense, expecting white to play d5, and then you do your magic. Then behold, there they go, knight f3. This hurts. You don't want to play a symmetrical game, d5. They know these stuffs obviously. So once again, you can just rely on the two knights system that I'm showing you, where you intend to transpose back to the Budapest, or go pawn to d6, knight d7, and e5. That system. So two systems to beat d4 players in a weird way. But what if this time white plays the Colle system with e3 and c3? If you can't get your Budapest, you can always rely on our second plan, where you play d6, knight d7, and e5. So you start with d6 as usual. The plan is, if they play bishop d3, the top played move. By the way, this is where you can even play e5 right away, because the light squared bishop is standing in the way of their queen. If they take, you can easily take back with your e5 pawn without having to worry about this trade. Next, you will play bishop b6, castle short. So that's how you deal with the Colle system. But after pawn to d6, they might play bishop b5, pinning your knight, and these are moments where you'd want to go back to plan B with knight d7. Remember, if d5, a more principled move is to go knight cb8. But anyway, sticking to our plan, pap, if knight takes, you can't take back obviously, so you take back with the pawn. Let's say knight c3, s6, you want to chase this light squared bishop. Anyways, they won't have many options. You just take back with your queen and equalize the game. Next, you are just going to play e6 and do this trade, play bishop d6, and bam, once again back to the e5 strategy. In short, if you don't get an opportunity to play the Budapest, just think of plan B, where you play d6, knight d7, and e5. Remember, the goal is to play pawn to e5 in all of these lines in order for us to go back to the king's pawn lines. This time, let's say white plays pawn to c4 instead of the usual Colle where they play bishop d3 and c3. Well, even against this pawn to c4, you won't get a chance to transpose the game back to the Budapest if you think about it, unless you want to play a gambit. So what do you do to play pawn to e5 right away? Two things. First, bishop d7 is okay, followed by pawn to e5 so that you don't trade queens. That's fine. But sticking to our plan, I don't want to confuse you with a lot of lines. You just go knight d7, you know the plan already. For example, if knight c3, you simply go pawn to e5. From a human perspective, this is great. In fact, this line might even transpose back to the premature Nimzowitsch defense with your dark squared bishop on its initial square. So you will play knight g6 and knight f6, then develop your bishop on e7, castle short. Last variation against the Fianchetto setups that you are not going to see very often. But let me just cover these types of d4 players. After d4, knight c6, knight f3, and knight f6, you might see some of your opponents Fianchettoing their bishop like this. What did I say once again? Whenever you see that your first plan of, transposing the game to the Budapest won't work, it's high time you start thinking of this pawn to e5 strategy, where you put your knight on d7. it works. In fact, the game might start as follows. White may begin with knight f3 on the first move, and then you play knight c6 in the hope that maybe you might transpose back to the Budapest after this sequence of moves on the board. But all of a sudden, white plays g3. This is the easiest. Since this video is all about pawn to e5, you just want to play e5 right away. If bishop g2, you can even play e4. This is just too much, and then pawn to d5. But anyways, after knight c6, your opponents will more likely play pawn to d4. What next? Do you play pawn to d5? That's fine, but if you do that, you're going to play an equal game up to the end, or maybe an equal boring game. So what you want to do is to start with your two knights first. Remember, the goal is to play the Budapest if white allows, like this. But if white decides to Fianchetto by this time, you know you're not going to get your Budapest, right? So these are moments where you'd want to switch back to plan B, pap. After bishop g2, you want to play e5, but after takes, maybe you're going to lose the right to castle or your queen. In this position, e5 is justifiable, by the way. You can play that, not much of a stretch, but you can just go knight d7 once again, because there's just nothing that white can do. Trust me, even in this line. Maybe c4 or castle short, whatever. Now you play pawn to e5, d5, knight e7. You know the plan already, pop, and you'll have a very solid game. By the way, once you finish your development on the king side, you want to start focusing on the queen side and open up the queen side like that. Anyway, now, in closing, there's one line that I have been ignoring on purpose, and you might see this happening in your games, e.g. after d4, knight c6, knight f3, and knight f6. Instead of white playing pawn to c4, the queen's gambit set up, or bishop f4, the London set up, or pawn to e3, the Colle system, or even the Fianchetto systems, you might see your opponents playing an early pawn to d5. That is after you develop your two knights first. So what do you do against this? Well, two things. First, you should know that this has been played even at the top level before. Dingley ran MVL, you can see these games. Carlsen won a beautiful game against a 2687 rated GM and the rest. There's actually a way you can play pawn to e5 even in this line. So you first start with knight b8, a theoretical move, and after pawn to c4, you simply go pawn to d6. Remember, this time you might even play knight d7 instead of undeveloping your king's knight before playing pawn to e5. And after knight c3, the top played move, you don't even have to play knight d7. Positionally speaking, you have e5 in this position. This is all fine. If you think about it, you will develop your pieces normally and all that. The only advice I can give in this line is that you always want to play a5. This is a well-known theoretical move. Why playing a5? Because someday you would want to plant your queen's knight on c5. So that a5 pawn will be stopping pawn to b4 in many variations. So remember to play a5 in this line. I mean, even if white takes with ampersand, the best you can do is just to take back with your f pawn, and now you have a semi-open file for your rook. For example, after pawn to e4, you go knight c6, normal development, say bishop e2, bishop e7, castle short, and here we go. Next, you even play pawn to e5 whenever you want to, and bishop e6. Now you know that even in the queen's pawn game, it is possible to play e5 without facing any real problems. And this is for you guys who loved my knight c6 defense course, or my French mechanics and the mechanics defense. Now, time for you to go and check out my new e5 defense course, which I have also linked in the comment section down below. And I'm glad to say, so far it has received a lot of attention and people are getting it like crazy. So it's an opening response that you try against white's e4 opening. You're going to learn how to play against the Scotch, the Ruy Lopez, the Bishop's opening, 3 Knights opening, the 4 Knights game, the Vienna game, even the Italian game. So it's the complete e5 defense course that I just launched with my team. You better go and check it out. Thank you so much for watching this video. Until next time, have a wonderful day. Bye bye.